Righto! This is a companion video to my main tutorial about video transitions. It's really long, so I basically cut a bunch of sections out of it and put them in here. To get good transitions, you gotta spend time or money. And by watching this video, you chose time. So here we go. Also, a lot of this won't make sense if you have not watched the other tutorial first. Starting with the dissolve. Premiere's dissolve is free, but it's linear, which sucks. So, to get a curved dissolve, you can keyframe opacity on the end of one clip and then overlap it above another one. Then you can apply easy ease to both keyframes to get that curve, and then adjust these handles to make the curve more or less extreme. Do not keyframe both clips, or you'll be able to see through both of them onto the layers below. If you want to compensate for the linear compositing problem, you'll have to extend one of the Bezier handles a lot further than usual. Or you can nest both clips and turn off linear compositing in that nested sequence, which is annoying. Or you can just turn off all linear compositing, but then I can't be held responsible for what else happens in your timeline. The linear wipe. As mentioned in the main video, Premiere does have a soft edge wipe effect, where you can choose any angle or any degree of softness. It lacks the quality of life stuff that you get from a true transition, but you knew that already. One thing you can do is put a marker on your clip where the transition starts, so you do at least have a nice little visual to help you, and something for the other clip to snap to. Once again, this is negatively affected by the linear compositing problem, so again, you can nest both clips and turn off linear compositing inside of that nested sequence. All other wipes. You don't need a true transition to do a wipe. You can use anything you like and just put a track matte or Luma matte on it. I found these free ones. They're absolutely terrible, but it doesn't matter. God, I hate how that little piece here lingers. It looks so stupid. I downloaded these, and here's what they look like. Wow. All it does is it goes from perfectly black, it does something in the middle, and it goes to perfectly white. That's all you need to make a wipe out of anything to go from any video source to any other video source. Here's another one. So, what you do is you take your first video source, it's just a normal video, and then grab a second video source, whatever, I'm just going to grab this one. And then we go find a wipe that we want. I'll go with one of these. Now we've got this shot, and then it does that, and then it goes to that shot. That's not what we want. Guess what? Track matte key. Slap that on there. You say matte Luma, and you set it to the layer directly above it, and bada bing, bada boom, you're already done. It's so simple. Let's watch that back. And then, oh no, it switched back to video source A. What happened? Well, because this is looking for the thingy above it, and then suddenly it runs out. It goes from black to white, and then instantly back to black. What you'd have to do is put a cut on the clip, and then delete that, and now it's fixed. Ta-da! Now, the other way to solve that problem is if you don't want to have to make a cut, what you do is you invert the whole thing, and now it'll look like this, which is not what we wanted, but then you also have to invert this one. Ta-da! And because what's above here is pure blackness, then this is still going because now it's using blackness as indicating show this layer instead of showing anything underneath it. So there you go. Now, there's a few things to keep in mind when you use this. Number one, the track matte. Everyone hates the way that it works. Let's watch this. Oh no, what's going on? The track matte is centered over here. That's not what it's supposed to be. Let's take a look at it. No, it's centered in the middle, but when we put that on, it's centered over there. What's going on? Well, this is a 4K clip, and that wouldn't be a problem except that I have scaled it in from 50%. And I've moved it over. And it's using that as the center of the thing that it's doing the matting from. I want this matte to stay exactly where it is no matter what the layer underneath it is doing. That's not how it works. It's incredibly dumb. So what's the workaround? There's always a workaround. Take the track matte off, cut that off, nest the whole thing. Now you're at the correct sequence resolution and stuff. Now you paste it on and now it works. The other thing is, you can make anything you want. If you don't want to use Premiere's iris wipe because it reduces your resolution, you can just make your own. I just made this out of a simple circle that increases its scale. I didn't even need to nest this one to get it to work. I just put that above it and ta-da! You just made your own iris wipe. And you can make it into a star. You can make a star wipe. You can actually do this, offset that, turn the whole circle black. Look at that. And then do it again, have another one in there. Doo-doo. I could do this, take that whole thing and nest it, and then slap that up there. And bada bing, bada boom, look at what you did. Oh, we have to let it keep going. See, you can do whatever you want. Just to make this super clear, as long as you start at pure black and you go to pure white, you can do any kind of mixed up nonsense you want in the middle, including grayscale. That's why I put this one here. This will just show both layers at the same time. This will show one of them, this will show the other. Anything grayscale will show anything in between. And technically, like, there's anti-aliasing on here, so it does the same on the edges there. So you can't just put that anywhere, you have to nest it. So I nested it, and then I put it above these two clips. And ta-da, we get this horrible, horrible transition. But you can make whatever you want. It works better to just see it on colors. So here you go. And again, you can just swap out the footage for whatever you want. So I'm going to put that one in. Ta-da, there it is. This one, you know, we could have those girls again. Ta-da. What a dreadful transition. But you can make whatever you want. So that's how you make any wipe transition you want without having to rely on any true transitions. Anything you want. Have fun. The push. You don't need to make this one yourself because it's free from Film Impact. But they did lock off some features. So if you want those, you'll have to use After Effects and parent both of your clips to a null and animate that. Oh, and then if you want some overshoot, you'll have to duplicate clip B and mirror it and put it off to the side so that you have, you know, something to shoot into, like this. Or you could do it inside Premiere by nesting both clips, doubling one of the dimensions, moving clip B into that space, and then animating the position of this giant clip using the motion or transform effect. Now you can use fancy keyframing, you know, bouncing and stuff if you want to. Beware the transform effect's motion blur, it looks pretty terrible. Use the directional blur and custom animate it, or just use After Effects' blur, which is automatic and really easy and great. It looks good. Cube spin! Oh, I have no idea. After Effects is your only real option for this, but I'd say go find yourself another tutorial if you want to make this one. I'm not going to help you. The edge stretch. There are some tutorials you can follow to make an edge stretch transition yourself, but don't bother, it's not worth it. I tried, it sucked. Center stretch. You can make this manually by going to a clip's motion effect and clicking off uniform scale. Then you can animate just horizontal or vertical stretchiness. But it's probably easier to just use the transform effect so you don't mess up any animation you've already done with the scale parameter. If you want to add motion blur, don't use the directional blur effect, since it affects the whole frame equally. Instead, increase the transform effect's shutter angle parameter. The zoom, in or out. I really don't think it's worth making this one yourself, but if you must, you'll need to use the transform effect. It's the only way to get a zoom blur that I know of. Just turn the shutter angle all the way up, pick your anchor point, and animate the scale parameter. Alternatively, you can import stuff into After Effects and parent it all to a null object and animate the opacity to transition from one to the other. But then you'll also need to mirror the edges, and this is just way too much manual work to have to do every single time. The flash is actually pretty good if you make it yourself. You just need an adjustment layer. Plop one down over a cut in your footage and trim the ends to your desired length. I've used 10 frames. I prefer to make the tail end a little bit longer, and I like to put a marker on the exact spot of the underlying cut for easy snapping. Put the levels effect on the adjustment layer, and inside the parameter RGB white input level, make 3 keyframes. One at the start, middle, and end. Now, you could decrease the middle keyframe's value all the way down to 0, so that the entire image will go above 100 IRE, but I think the levels effect just by itself doesn't look as good as when you combine it with an exposure change from Lumetri. So I only used a value of 60. Then add easing to the two end keyframes and adjust them manually to make a smoother curve. Now add a Lumetri color effect and animate the exposure to a maximum of about 3.2, using 3 keyframes as before. This, plus the levels effect, should get most of your frame to pure white, but not all of it, which to me feels about right. Now add the Gaussian blur effect such that it's above the other effects, meaning the blur will be applied first. You can experiment to see what you prefer, but I think this way looks best. Make your 3 keyframes and use a blurriness of about 70. Then I just used Easy Ease for the keyframes on the end. And there you go, it's a custom-made exposure flash. You can now copy-paste this entire adjustment layer to anywhere you want an exposure flash. You can also copy-paste it across projects. Put it in your template Premiere project, or just save all those effects as one preset with either scaled keyframes or keyframes anchored to the endpoint, and then you can plop that onto a new adjustment layer whenever you need it. Also, if you want, you can add a short dissolve to the footage underneath. Oh, and this black spot was really annoying me, so I also increased the black levels and reduced the saturation. Looking at them side by side, I still think the Film Impact Flash looks better, and it's definitely easier to use and adjust, but hey, this one is free. The blur. Premiere Pro has 3 non-obsolete blur effects that you can use as transitions if you keyframe them. Let's start with the Gaussian blur. You can put it directly onto a clip, but I prefer to just use an adjustment layer most of the time. So grab an adjustment layer, place it above a cut, and trim it to your desired length. I'm going to make this one perfectly centered. Put the Gaussian blur effect on the adjustment layer, and for the blurriness parameter, make keyframes at the beginning, middle, and end. Increase the value of the middle keyframe to taste. I used 40, but later increased that to 80. Make sure repeat edge pixels is on, or the edges will get darker, which you don't want. And you can ease the beginning and end keyframes if you really want to. However, there is one problem. Watching it back, you can pretty clearly see the cut happening underneath all of that blur. But hey, don't worry, you can just put a cross dissolve on there and resize it to be a bit smaller than the adjustment layer. That's a perfect fix. I also recommend that you put a marker on the adjustment layer's center keyframe so it'll snap to the footage underneath. And presto, you've got yourself a portable blur transition that you can copy and paste anywhere. Now, you can do the same thing with the directional blur, but we have a problem. There's no option for repeat edge pixels, which results in dark edges, and that's pretty annoying. I came up with my own workaround for that, but don't bother because Mr. Horse taught me a better way. Just grab the alpha adjust effect and check on ignore alpha. Ta-da! It's fixed! Amazing! This is so much easier than all this garbage. Last and least, Premiere Pro's camera blur not only doesn't look very much like a real camera blur, but also does not work if you try to keyframe it on an adjustment layer. This is a bug, and don't hold your breath on it ever getting fixed. Let's move on before I lose what's left of my sanity. The Mosaic does not currently exist as a true transition from any vendor, so you have to make this one yourself if you want it. And so the instructions for doing that are actually back in the main tutorial. Link with timestamp in the description. How to make the pop transition. Very early in my career, I used the following crude and ugly method to make objects pop in Premiere. Set an object's scale to 0. 2 or 3 frames later, set it to 100. 2 frames later, make it 110, and 2 frames later, 100. I didn't even bother to ease it. Then I saved that as a preset. This does not work very well, because if you've already scaled and positioned an object to where you want it, putting this preset onto it will reset all those other parameters. And the size 100 could be any size. I could get around this by nesting objects first, but then they would always pop out from the center of the nest, which I usually didn't want. A better method is to use the transform effect, which won't reset your motion effect. Start at a scale of 0, then 2 or 3 frames later, keyframe to 100, then 110 a few frames later, maybe 2, and then back to 100 a few frames after that. Play with the timing to see what you like, and ease all those frames to make them look nice. Now, I would say that you should set the shutter to 180 degrees to get some motion blur, but it seems to be broken right now. When I tried this during my research and testing phase, it used 0% as 100%, and also used the top left as its anchor point. As soon as you take the shutter speed back down to 0, this fixes itself. Then later, when I did this in the editing phase, the anchor point did not change, but it still treated 0% scale as 100% scale. So I changed 0% to 15% just to get it to work. The transformation effect is still so broken, despite Adobe's many attempts to fix it. Did you know that it's literally 1,000 times less accurate than the motion effect? That's why you should never use it for a constant slow pan, because it stutters due to not having granular enough sub-pixel positioning. It's so stupid. Anyway, save that as a preset using anchor to in point, and then make another one in a completely different transform effect for your pop out transition, saving that so it anchors to your out point. Now you've got some pop transitions that you don't have to pay for every month, but they do have several downsides when compared to the true transitions from Film Impact. Because they're not true transitions, there is no visual indicator on the clip that this faux transition is present. Also, when you move or trim the clip's head or tail, the transition won't come along for the ride, as it would with a true transition. Just having this transform effect on the clip all the time can absolutely slow down Premiere's rendering just a bit, though it used to be a lot worse. It also uses the center of the clip instead of the center of opacity, so you might have to finagle the anchor point and position parameters to fix that every time. And you can't easily change the speed or animation of these faux transitions nearly as easily as you can with Film Impact. So that's a lot of downsides, all of which are going to cost you time, but it won't cost you money, so pick your poison. The flip. Again, just use Premiere's basic 3D effect and keyframe it. Because it's an effect, it does work based on the center of the object. Even though I have the Film Impact flip, I used the basic 3D effect as a transition in this moment, because I wanted the motion to continue, and this was just a simpler and easier way of doing that. You can make your own glitch effect if you really want to, but I've hardly ever done this. There are hundreds of tutorials for that. Just remember to use reference, and don't follow those tutorials too closely if they stray too far from the real thing in a way that is not aesthetically pleasing. The spin. Probably not worth making yourself. You'd have to mirror all the edges in After Effects so that you don't cut your own resolution in half, or I guess you could use multiple layers of nested sequences and then apply different stuff to each one, but at that point it's probably worth just buying one of those transition packs so that you don't have to. Anyway, I think that's all of them. Anything else, like the Venetian blinds and page peel, are briefly mentioned in the main tutorial. Bye!